Okay, for those of you who are in virtual attendance, we're just ironing out some of the technical stuff here, and we'll get started here in a couple of minutes. All right, I think we're going to get started here finally. People who are virtual, let me know if you can't hear me, but if you're having trouble, it sounds like you have to turn up your volume all the way. That's how the system works here. So anyway, hey, thanks for coming here today, guys. It's great to see some of the familiar faces and some new faces. I guess I will open this up by introducing our new state agency title. So we are no longer the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, but we are now the Colorado Energy and Carbon Management Commission. So we got a new acronym, ECMC. So I'll try to keep that going moving forward. I think after a month, it's starting to kind of roll off the tongue. So as far as a matter of, this drone final reclamation program, this is a required operator training. So I know we have a sign up sheet here for the in-person stuff. Make sure you sign in, and I'm probably gonna have to follow up with some of you. I know when you guys signed up for this, you said that you work for multiple operators, and we want to make sure that those operators get credit for kind of, taking this training, so to speak. And then I think we'll be able to get everybody virtually on that attendance as well. So we'll just jump right in here. Yeah, I guess I should probably introduce myself. Chris Benches, I'm one of the Northeast reclamation specialists. I have covered the whole Northeastern region, but now I'm kind of focusing in on the Weld County area, but I have the Wyoming border kind of all the way down to South Weld County, Larimer, Boulder, and all that. So, and here with me today, who will probably help me out, is Denise Arthur, who is the reclamation supervisor. Okay. And then, oh yes, and we have Jenny. Can't forget Jenny. She's been super helpful in getting everything lined up for us on this technical aspect. So, as far as an overview of this presentation, I'm really going to be following the drone guidance document itself. And let me know if anybody has any trouble with finding that drone guidance. It should be on our website. You all should have gotten, or at least the operators should have gotten the email of this being rolled out, but please reach out if you need this or are having trouble getting the actual guidance. But yeah, the way this is structured today is simply kind of going through that guidance with the exception of this section called final reclamation closure process. That's not in the guidance document, but I feel like it's going to be helpful for you all to understand how we look at things and how you guys can make some decision-making processes on submitting these Form 4 final reclamation complete notices. And then if you guys have questions, let's wait till the end and we can address those. I do have these slides numbered, so you can see we're on slide 2. So that'll help you out if you're, trying to draw back on your notes on anything that you might have. Okay, so required operator training. So why are we doing this? Why wasn't this just rolled out and let you guys hit the ground running? Well, there's kind of a number of reasons to do so. I think today will illustrate that there's a number of examples that if I tried to put that in the guidance document probably would have been double the length, and I think it's already lengthy enough. So hopefully with this training here today, we'll engage with some questions and hopefully have everything understood. And then, this is a big step for our agency. As you all know, historically, we have had to, have boots on the ground and verify this stuff. And so creating this process is something that is obviously, again, just a big step for this agency. So we want to make sure we are all on the same page. And then, yeah, obviously the purpose of this guidance is to assist, the operators in, submitting final reclamation complete notices for drone with drone technology for cropland locations. This guidance only pertains to final reclamation on cropland locations. It does not address anything regarding interim reclamation or for final reclamation on rangelands. And we'll go over this a little bit more. And to talk about, obviously the intent of this guidance is, it helps reduce, ECMC's, resources to allow operators and us to, move that closure process forward much quicker than before. As you guys all know, I mean, it's a challenge getting out there to document this stuff during the appropriate growth season before it gets harvested. We're always kind of coming, into that kind of challenge. So I think this is really going to help out. And then if an operator, can properly document and submit the required documentation, we will hopefully be able to, pass final reclamation through a submission of a desktop inspection. I think maybe this is a good time to talk about this now. We don't have the staff resources to, be going back and forth on draft submissions and resubmissions and whatnot. So it'll be evident kind of throughout this presentation that, hey, I mean, if there's something that's missing or not right, it's likely just going to be a denial and you're just going to have to resubmit. So hopefully, again, we'll all be on the same page, so we won't have that happen. But yeah, to give a little bit more of a background on our, ECMC drone program, many of you know that we've started this back in 2018. And so we've had a bit of time to, play with some different programming and, get with the tools and see how the logistics and feasibility of this is for our agency. And undoubtedly, it's a huge benefit to our agency throughout, most of our units in our agency. So we, currently use drone deploy, and that's something that I believe maybe Adam can confirm. Do we have another 5-year contract. So yeah, we're going to be sticking with drone deploy for another 5 years. I know there's a lot of other folks out here who use that or have used it. But that's kind of our software that we've been using. And, to talk a little bit about, this guidance, it's really structured with what equipment we have. And so that's really the constraint here. So we have just the basic standard cameras. So we have the red, blue, green cameras. We don't have anything fancy. So I guess you could say it's the bare bones on that. So really how we are approaching this program is just looking at kind of the raw visual image. Well, I think we all realize that there are advanced technologies out there with drones looking at, some of the crop health. There's different algorithms out there. There's actually algorithms out there for red, blue, green cameras, but there's a lot of, skepticism to some of those, like the VARI algorithm. It's just a greenness index. It's not a true plant health. So we don't want to use that. So that is, again, kind of our constraint. And so we have to be able to, be able to repeat what's going on. So you guys, of course, I know a lot of you have some of those advanced technologies. So you can go above and beyond what this guidance, states in here, but you have to at least minimally meet these requirements here. Moving forward, dive into some of this cropland discussion, which is, I believe, in section 2 of the guidance document. So what I did here is, or what we did here with this is basically use the USDA field crops for Colorado, and we created a table of common crops grown in Colorado. This table is, hopefully going to help folks kind of in a planning aspect of when you might, think to, get out there and get your drone imagery during these acceptable growth stages. And I guess I can talk a little bit more about some of that stuff, but basically the common crops out there are, the corn, wheat, sorghum, barley, millet, sugar beets, alfalfa. I think I even had potatoes in there. I believe most of our potatoes are actually grown in the San Luis Valley and I don't think there's too many oil and gas down there, but that's kind of the basis for this. That's where we kind of got our, acceptable crops, I guess, and common crops in Colorado. To talk about, some of the examples, I used corn and wheat in this guidance document, and I felt that was very appropriate because corn and wheat were the 2 biggest crops per acreage in Colorado, at least reported for 2022. So we'll go in that into more depth here. But I guess to talk about some of these common crops, I have alfalfa there with an asterisk. We left this pretty open, flexible in our guidance as far as when to fly and report on alfalfa. We all know that you can get multiple cuts in a season. Just be aware that, hey, give it some time after it is, the first cut or second cut. It's going to take a little while for it to green up. So don't go out there and try to get your drone imagery right after it's been cut. So again, we're trying to leave a little bit of flexibility with that. We realize there's, a lot of other crops out there. Just if you have one of those crops that aren't on our list, reach out to our group and we'll work with you on a case-by-case basis. And then, of course, there's other, cropland types that actually this comes straight from the Form 2A. So there's improved pasture, hay meadow, and CRP lands. This would be considered unacceptable cropland because these are, associated with perennial grasses. So we aren't there yet. So maybe someday, but right now we're not going to be looking at anything in those categories. And then to move on to, talking about this crop growth stages, how basically we just looked at the fundamental principles of crop growth to be able to say, hey, this is when you all can go out there and, you know, start to document some of these crops. And so it really can be broken down simply by vegetative and reproductive stages. You know, the vegetative growth stage obviously favors development of roots for strong plant structure and leaves for photosynthesis. You know, and then obviously the reproductive stage is where, you know, the focus is on producing, you know, your fruits, grains, and vegetables. What we're trying to do is have folks document the crop growth, you know, near the full coverage stage, which isn't necessarily the, you know, reaching maturity stage, but it's the full cover stage. And the full cover is the peak growth, that when a crop is intercepting maximum energy and most of the soil is shaded by the crop canopy. So I think we can start to look at some of those examples here with corn. So corn, you know, has a vegetative growth stage from obviously from emergence all the way to the tasseling stage, which is the VT stage. I guess I forgot I've got a pointer here for folks who are here in person. So VE, vegetative emergence, and then VT, the tasseling stage. So what we're allowing in this guidance is for folks to start to document starting at the V10 stage and beyond, all the way to harvest. And the reason, and I'll give you some background on that. So the full cover stage for corn, it varies depending on the corn variety, but it's around 10 days after the tasseling stage. And so with corn, we're allowing folks to actually document some of the vegetative growth and the reproductive growth. That's going to be different when we start to talk about your grains. But to go a little bit more into, you know, these, you know, stages, if you will, I have a slide here to kind of help demonstrate what's going on, or how to identify what is the V10 stage. So there's a lot of different methodologies that are out there to identify stages, but one common one is called the leaf collar method. And actually, I believe it's pretty similar to folks who go out and do crop assessments for hail damage. So it's a pretty easy method, but it can get confusing as the corn matures and grows. So when you get to about the V6 stage, it starts to drop the lower leaves. And so you no longer know, hey, well, what's leaf 1? Where's leaf 2? And when they're talking about leaf 1s and leaf 2s, they're saying that leaf has to have a collar on it, okay? So to identify, you know, what stage you're at, you would have to take a corn like this, cut it down the middle, all the way down to the rootstock, and I should keep my pointer out here. So there's this pithy triangle here, and that's where nodes 1 and 4 are. And then as it grows, there's this first internode. And then you can see that there's this first, what they're calling distinguishable separate stalk node. That is where sheath 5 attaches to. So what you could do is follow that up, and then you would count how many leaf collars you have above that 5th one. So if you have 5 leaf collars above that 5th one, you're at V10. If you have 4, you'd be V9. And so this goes all the way, I believe, up to V18, where it reaches maximum height, and then it, you know, goes into your tasseling stage. So I think we can move on into the winter wheat example. Okay, so winter wheat. So I know there's I believe at least 5 different gross scale systems developed worldwide for wheat and other similar grains. One of the I guess the most common one used here in the States is what's called the Feeks growth stages. And so that is, again, broken up into vegetative and reproductive stages. So the reproductive or the vegetative stages are stages 1 through 5. And then the reproductive stage actually starts at 6 and goes from 6 all the way to 11 and is harvested at 11.4. So what we're saying for your wheats and your grains is, hey, we want y'all to wait till we get to this heading stage, 10.1. And you can start to document that at that heading stage until harvest. So hopefully that helps to explain, some of the common crops. You can see how corn is different in that we're allowing you to document vegetative growth and reproductive growth, whereas your wheats and grains, we're not allowing any vegetative growth. It has to be in the reproductive growth stage. So this is a section that is not in the guidance document, but I believe is, again, going to be helpful in a helpful reminder for folks about looking at the total disturbance area. So as you all know, our rules say that for final reclamation, reclamation has been performed per rules 1003 and 1004. 1003 are the interim reclamation rules and 1004 are the final reclamation rules. What I have seen out there is folks, when they're doing their analysis, they tend to only look at this 2021 image. Well, you can see he's got three wells, multi-well pad, on-location tank battery. And what'll happen is an assessment will be made just around this extent. Well, a lot of these locations were never inspected for interim reclamation, which is fine, but you have to remember that interim reclamation is part of this final reclamation evaluation. And so looking kind of back here, 2014, you could see the total disturbance area. It's much larger than that 2021. So when you're setting up your drone flights and stuff like that, make sure you are getting this interim reclamation area in your evaluation. If that's missing in the evaluation, that could be a potential reason for, denial. So again, making sure you're looking at total disturbance area. So we'll just stick with this example, but to talk further about our final reclamation closure process. So again, this is a multi-well pad with an on-location tank battery. So let's just say in theory that this would be ready to go and be submitted for final reclamation complete notice. This would be one submission, and you would use the location ID. That being said, location IDs should be used on any of your final reclamation complete notices. You shouldn't be using any well APIs. You should be using location IDs. So, we're going to be looking, or you all should be looking at, hey, access roads, spills releases. Since this is an on-location tank battery, we're going to be looking for those Form 42 notices for flow line abandonments. So don't forget any of that. And I guess to further talk about access roads, I think this is a good example. This image is cut off a little bit. If this was submitted, I would want there to be a little bit better explanation, like what's really going on with this access road? Where is it coming in? I'd like to kind of know, hey, where's that county road? Where's that entry point? So you might have to zoom out a little bit. And we'll get into this a little bit when we're talking about some of the required maps and the overviews. But here's kind of a better extent. We can kind of see really what's going on. So what I've got highlighted here is this green section. Well, that's a shared agricultural access road. That's something that we're not going to have the operator reclaim, but you should document that and help explain that in your in this closure process. That red area now, I mean, that to me looks like that was built for oil and gas, and that would then have to be reclaimed. So make sure that you know, we're getting the full extent on what's going on with your total disturbance area when it comes to access roads. I know in the DJ Basin, I mean, access roads are pretty minimal. They're pretty short. But again, they can get kind of lengthy and confusing. So don't assume we know. So help us to explain. And then I guess we'll get a little bit, you know, into I guess more of a complicated situation. So we have situations where you have an off-location tank battery that serviced multiple wells. As you can see here, this tank battery serviced 4 wells. I guess we'll just start out with a theoretical, you know, example, but let's say everything passes. The access road, the well location, the flow lines, there's no spills or releases, or they pass, access roads pass. This would be 4 separate submissions, all using the location IDs for the well location. One of these wells is gonna have to be tied to the tank battery. We don't, you know, our system for tracking tank batteries is kind of problematic, but we have to have a well associated with that tank battery. And it becomes more important if the tank battery fails. Well, then what well are we gonna associate it with? And so you just have to designate it. So let's do another scenario. We've got these 4 wells. Let's say all 4 of the wells and everything else passes, but the tank battery doesn't. Again, pick one of the 4 that you're gonna say, hey, this northwestern well here, it's gonna be tied to this tank battery because this tank battery doesn't pass yet. Our database is based off of the well API. That's kind of why we have to do this. But, you know, if everything else passes, you could submit 3 other final reclamation complete notices for these other wells. Just to make note that, hey, there is a tank battery that doesn't meet our standards yet and is going to be linked to one of these other wells. Just make sure you're documenting that for us. I think that's all I really have to say about here. I think to talk more about this idea of looking at the total disturbance area, I'm going to use this same example. So we have the same area here. We have the same tank battery, same wells, just one image is 2013, one is 2022. I think it's pretty obvious what happened here. Back in 2013, it was flood irrigation, and then it changed to pivot irrigation. I'm not saying that the roads in this example necessarily changed, but I have seen when irrigation systems are converted from flood to pivot, your access road might change. So, you know, it looks like it's coming, you know, this northeastern well, it's coming directly north off of this shared, you know, road here with the ag purposes. And I think when you do the pivot irrigation, I can't tell where it went, but just make sure that the access road didn't change. I have seen this happen quite often in the ag industry out here. And then I guess one more note on this, you know, if we're talking about access roads, looking at this 2022 imagery, you can see that this tank battery is kind of shared with this pivot irrigation road out there. Again, this area that I'm highlighting in the green for folks here, and looks like Denise is trying to highlight it in the white arrow, that will remain, right? We're not going to have, you know, you guys push the surface owner to reclaim that. That is going to be used for ag purposes, so we wouldn't be requiring that. But we would be asking for, you know, these other extensions that come off, that those be reclaimed. So I think we can start to get into section 3 here, which is, kind of the meat of this. And I think where we're going to come up with some of the examples regarding the drone and handheld documentation requirements. So we'll start with the pre-plugging active operations location overview, which comes from section, looks like 3.11. So what the purpose of this overview for our use is to understand the total infrastructure of that location, right? Especially when there, in this case, is an off-location tank battery. So make sure that when you're doing this pre-plugging, active operations location overview, that you're getting that full extent, making sure we understand where access roads are and all of that. Obviously, this is going to be, you're going to be using historic imagery for this. There's lots of different historic imagery sources. This one I'm using right here is just Google Earth, but I'll show you in the next example. Obviously, feel free to use our COGIS maps. Those are a great tool. For folks who are in the, the core of the DJ, if you've never used Weld County has a great aerial imagery. I believe, I was just looking at this the other day, and I think they have stuff all the way back to 2003 and in increments of like 2-3 years separating it. They're pretty good. So just to kind of talk about, hey, the requirements of this map. I mean, we're all professionals here, but make sure that we're having a title, and we've got a legend, and you've got your imagery source, your imagery date, your scale bar, your north bar, just the basic, cartography, information on this. This is just bare bones. I'm going to show you some better examples here in a bit, but we will continue to use this example on this next slide. And again, this is just another illustration of using a different imagery source, which comes from our COGIS map database. I think this is really great because, you can turn on your flow line layers, turn on your environmental layers. You can see what remediation's out there, double check that everything's closed out. And so, yeah, absolutely use this. And this example I have forward here, it's actually a complaint example, so it does not pass yet. But I think it's a good example to kind of get people thinking again about what needs to be reported. So as you can see here, there's, I believe, 4 remediation projects, and looks like one of them is still open. This one orange one, 27201. And then there's 2 spill and release points, which may be turned into Form 27s. But our guidance, when we'll get to it here about the closure process, you want to make sure that you are talking about each and every one of those remediation and spills. And you have to document that reclamation was successful wherever that was. If this 2720, I haven't looked at this, but the 27201 remediation project, I don't know if that was a release along the flow line, but if it was, make sure you are documenting that area of release or spill meets reclamation standards. And then moving on to, the next map requirement, which is the post plugging and abandonment location overview. Again, this in our guidance, it spells this out, but this is going to be an orthomosaic image from your drone. We're not going to accept historic imagery here. So this is illustrating in my legend down there that the background imagery source is Google Earth, and the Google Earth imagery date is June 10th, 2021. You can see the drone overlay, which is from which was flown in September 1st, 2022. Again, I'll give you some better examples, but this should be similar to that pre-plugging active operations overview, right? We want to see, hey, oh yeah, that's where that tank battery was, up there in the blue. Yeah, And again, this isn't one that passes, and it's very obvious as to why crop is not growing properly. I think I have, I'll talk more about this, but again, we use drone deploy, and I'm going to be talking about the requirement for those cardinal directional drone photos in this next slide, but I guess I can talk about it here. That little blue water drop is where what's called a panorama was flown. And I know that the drone guidance says, if you got a situation like this, that there might be 10 drone photos that are required. Well, that may not be needed here. But what the guidance is getting at, the guidance is saying, hey, you might have to go up to that tank battery and do cardinal directional drone photos, northeast, southwest, come back down to the well location, do northeast, southwest, that's 8, get the flow line, that's 9, and get the access road, that's 10. Well, it's not always going to be like that. And I think that in this example, if I was doing a final reclamation closure for this operator, I'd probably move that blue pin really kind of to the middle of where the tank battery and well location is. And you could probably simply, for your cardinal directional drone photos, you could probably get away with only doing 4 here. If you put the panorama right in the middle, you get your north. So you get your flow line, you get your tank battery, and you get sufficient, reference areas. Then you get your east, which would just probably be some more reference areas. You get your south, which would be the remainder of your flow line, your well location, and then your access road. And then your west, you'll probably be capturing some more flow line and reference area photos. So next slide talks about those cardinal directional drone photos. So this, again, was taken from that water drop. With the panoramas, I mean, you could zoom in, zoom out. I didn't zoom in with these. I just kind of used the raw image, but you can see, that tank battery off here to the north. You could see possibly where that flow line area would be. You have some reference areas. And I think the guidance, we left this pretty flexible, right? With these cardinal directional drone photos, we want to make sure you are documenting the disturbance area with some reference areas so that we can compare. This is an art, with some of this stuff, and I'm constantly learning what is the best heights to get this angle so that we can really do this comparison. This particular example here, this is flown at 200 feet. I know some folks, move around, they do 70, do 120. I think I've done all those. But again, I think we left it pretty open for a number of reasons. There's different technologies out there with drones, different capabilities and cameras, and then you have different constraints, right? Safety hazards, maybe you have to stay below a certain, height because you've got some, obstruction above you. But before I move on, again, talking about total disturbance and this idea of, hey, we don't assume we know everything. I think you guys can see, hey, well, you can see where that tank battery was up here to the north, but what's going on over here? There's a crop deficiency over here, this linear feature that leads to over here. And if you zoomed in, you would see some PVC pipes or some piping, and one might think, well, shoot, there was an open remediation project. Are those monitoring wells? I don't know. Well, because this is a complaint, I know what that is, but that's actually not oil and gas disturbance. That was a city water line. So help spell that out for us, because if, we see something like this and this isn't identified, we're going to call it out. So please help to just, describe what all is going on out there. Some of these, deficiencies might not be oil and gas related, or they could be. And then just for FYI, this was just the boots on the ground photo of that tank battery. You could see clearly there's either the corn is stunted or there's just, no corn growth at all. It's just all weeds. So that's a little bit of a example there, further example of that. This is just another cardinal directional drone photo example. Again, it looks pretty similar to the other one, but this was flown at 70 feet. Again, I mean, we're leaving this kind of open for you all, but just make sure we kind of get this angled perspective that we can do a comparison. I mean, it's obvious where, the disturbance area was. I mean, there's no corn growing, but I just really just using this as an example to say, hey, this is 70 feet. That other one was 200 feet. They both kind of are serving, similar purposes as far as getting that look at reference areas and disturbance area vegetation. And then I guess we got to talk about, I've seen some of this that has come out and used, and this wouldn't be acceptable as a, post plugging, I think I got that title wrong, post plugging operations, the location overview. It should be post plugging and abandonment location overview, but this is just too narrow. The extent is just not wide enough. I think with that other example where I showed it went from flood irrigation to pivot irrigation, access roads changed. I'm not sure I really understand where the access road is here. Is it down here off the map? Is it over here somewhere? I don't know. But, I realize that these orthomosaics are going to take longer, but make sure you are getting the proper extent. Obviously, the panos take 5 minutes versus orthos take, 15, 20, 25 minutes, just depending on how big the area is. But don't try to, cut any corners here, because something like this will just be an automatic denial. And then I guess to show some better examples, someone might be here in the audience, allowed me to use this. But here is, a little bit more of a professional example of a pre-plugging active operations location overview. So, they have, in this, it looks like they use Dr. Cog imagery. This is something I learned from them. I haven't heard of that before. It's a database that's found to be used along, I believe, the Front Range. And I think they're kind of expanding where they're capturing some of that imagery. But they use Dr. Cog imagery from 2014. And it looks like they digitized, this production facility and well location. Again, this is an on location, multi-well location, 4 wells. And, the only thing I guess I'd have to critique on this is that, hey, maybe this extent isn't big enough. I'm not really, understanding, the access road piece of this. I'm not sure where it comes in. Is it coming in from the south? Is it coming in from the north? So just, this would need to be expanded a little bit further. But other than that, I mean, hey, this imagery source information is all in here, what projection datum they used, the legends, all that stuff, location IDs, or the lat longs are there, disturbance anchorages, scales, all that good stuff. And then going to the post plugging and abandonment location overview, they left those digitized features in so you can see, hey, that's where everything was. And, to talk more about access roads, again, you can kind of see how maybe this would have been a little bit complicated to explain in the guidance document, but you see here that where the production facility was and a likely part of that access road was never put back into crop production. Well, I know that was because it was pre-existing. That was a graveled surface. If it's pre-existing like that, you have to document that, hey, this was a graveled hard surface. It was pre-existing. It doesn't have to go back into crop. So just make sure you are documenting that for us. And then looking at some of their cardinal directional drone photos, you could see again where that old production facility was and then where these wells were. This is a north aspect, good sufficient area to be able to see where the disturbance area might be, the total disturbance area might be with reference area crops. The other one here facing west. Okay. Moving on. So there's this handheld photographic evidence piece, right? And I guess maybe I'll back up, go to this other example. You know, if you can demonstrate with your drone imagery, and I think this does so, but we can see that equipment's all gone. It looks like it's stabilized, there's no erosion, but if your drone imagery doesn't sufficiently document that all equipment is gone, you might need to, you know, get handheld, you know, photos. I mean, you're there flying, might as well, you know, just get some backup stuff just in case. So that's what I'm going to be talking about here, is this handheld photographic evidence though. And this really comes into play when we're talking about these off location tank batteries that are not within cropland. So with this example here, you could see, hey, here's another tank battery that serviced, looks like 3 wells. Well, all the wells and flow lines are mostly in access roads, are, you know, mostly in cropland, but this tank battery, well, it's not. It's not in any type of crop production. So what the guidance is saying is make sure that you are getting handheld documentation of what the vegetation cover is for where that tank battery was. And now we're going to need a reference area, right? So you can simply bounce over here to this other corner and get your reference area photo, or maybe you can go up further here out of this other disturbance area. But just know that, hey, let's just document what that vegetation cover is, get a reference photo, and it has to be a handheld photo. It can't be a drone photo. And it'll be demonstrating that, you know, all equipment's gone, and again, the vegetation cover. So, you know, I think I have in this presentation, a lot of this, I haven't been kind of calling it out, but, you know, these flow line abandonment notices, you know, if you have an on location battery, it's going to be a Form 42, right? If you have these off location tank batteries, it's going to be a Form 44. So we're going to be looking for that. You guys should be submitting that documentation to us if it's an off location tank battery. So please report that stuff to us. If it's missing, again, probably going to be a potential denial. Okay, wrapping this up into section 4 here. So we'll go over, you know, obviously the closure information, drone information, and talk quickly about the location checklist and then those attachments. So the closure information, this is going to be, you know, really the meat of your documentation for us. You know, you have to provide a written summary and really describe again that total disturbance and that infrastructure for that location. Describe the complexities of it. You know, there's a lot of different scenarios I haven't even brought up here, but, you know, maybe your tank battery was shared with another operator and that remains active. Well, let us know that. Let us know, you know, what other complexities might be out there regarding access roads or flow lines. Really provide the meat of your detail in this closure information. And part of that is going to be a compliance summary. So I know that the guidance document talked about corrective actions. So if you, in your review, you saw that, you know, ECMC staff wrote a corrective action and the operator never submitted a field inspection report resolution form saying that it was complete, or staff never followed up on that, make sure you're documenting to say, hey, that compliance issue has been resolved and has been addressed. In addition to that, you know, hey, if there are any, you know, NOAVs, AOCs, document that stuff and make sure that those are all clean, you know, cleared up and approved. And then of course, if there's any variances associated with that location, we're going to want to know, you know, all the specifics with that, the hearing document number, what it was for, what, you know, specific details of what that variance was asking, and spell that out in there. Okay. I guess moving on to the drone information piece. So, you know, some of this I'm going to be using to, you know, obviously we have a contract for the next 5 years with the drone deploy, but there's always some other, you know, software that we might be interested in. So just submit what you guys are using, you know, always interested in equipment, and then making sure that we have, you know, legit pilots out there flying. I believe we had a recent complaint from a surface owner with someone flying a drone, and can't come to find out that individual was not FAA certified. So report in here the certification. That's going to be a big piece for this. So please add that. And then talking about this location checklist, I mean, really, hopefully this is going to be, you know, helpful for putting together that, you know, that closure summary. You know, I know there's a lot of, you know, footnotes here. I think it's all pretty self-explanatory, but again, I mean, it points to, hey, if this was a multi-well location, make sure you're listing all the form success document numbers and plugging dates. If it's an off-location tank battery, provide all that, you know, information. And then, you know, we've already talked about some of this in some of our examples, but if there was a spill release report or a site investigation, you know, please report all that. And you guys all know moving forward now, I mean, there's pretty much going to be any Form 27 on a closure now, but report any and all of that stuff included into the 4.2 section. I think that's pretty much enough said there. And then, you know, talking about this audit, you know, we are planning to perform this audit this year. So we're going to evaluate a subset of locations. And so the idea is that we would reach out to you and ask for a list. And that list would be locations you have flown that you intend to submit for a final reclamation closure. And that list, you know, needs to be provided, you know, in a timely manner so that we have enough time to go back and fly it, right? We don't want to be, you know, getting this list. Yeah, I know you guys will be getting this list to us quickly, but we're going to have to make sure that we're kind of comparing apples to apples here. So if you guys just flew this, we want to try to get it flown as well, you know, certainly before it gets harvested. So there's going to be a bit of coordination on this audit piece, you know, as far as us asking for information and you getting it back to us. And for this program to work, operators are going to have to submit all, you know, the required information set forth in this guidance, basically, you know, section 4.0, no later than March 1st the following year. You know, we realize that a lot of these are going to be flown. A lot of this work is done over the winter, a lot of winter work. And so we realize that, we understand that. But if we encourage you all to get that in before then, so that we can, you know, get going on this audit or start looking at some of these things. So that's kind of the background on that. Denise, did you have anything else to add to that? Okay. I think that is it. So we will take questions, and I think we will start with our in-person audience.
Been a really good presentation. No questions yet.
Drew. No. No, Abby's got one. Yeah, so for the virtual people, a question came in from I'm going to go all the way back up to, I think it was this one here, right? So, yeah, so the question was this idea of an off-location tank battery servicing multiple wells in closing out some but not others. So yeah, I think the question was, if the tank battery fails, you have to tie at least one of the wells to that failed tank battery. You can pass the other three. Just make sure you're having that descriptive narrative in there that says, hey, we're going to be tying this other well to this failed tank battery. You're going to be, yeah, and the question was, do you use the API or the location ID for the other three? And you're going to be using the location ID for those other three wells. Yep. Yeah. I mean, you know, everything has to pass right on those other three. I mean, your flow lines, spills, access roads, all that stuff, of course. Okay. 3.1.3. Oh, okay. What? 3 point, let's see. This one? Oh. The question was, what if the spill release GPS locations aren't provided? So yeah, I think the question was, if you've got like a spill or release along a flow line area, how would you like that reported? And you should be able to dive into the documents of that remediation project and look at the documents and see where that, you know, figure is, and you can pull from that. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I guess the question was just that, hey, what happens if there isn't a remediation that isn't reported, and you can't, or not reported, but not well documented, and maybe that wouldn't be a good example for a candidate for this program. Maybe we'll just do it the old school method. Okay. Yes. No, we want, so the question was, you know, the orthomosaic and the cardinal directional photos, you know, like why both? No, and there is both. So if we, it's this post plugging one. So we just want, you know, that orthomosaic image of the total extent. I mean, you're likely going to be getting a lot of that in your directional drone photos, but we still want this orthomosaic image. I mean, you know, I know that there's folks out there with, you know, high quality drones that are flying at 380 feet, you know, above ground, and, you know, can do just a fine job. So we talked about that as far as a pixel per image, and we don't have that requirement yet. I guess, you know, we'll see how things go, and then maybe we might have to tweak, but I think it's more just, this isn't really, this post plugging in an abandonment location overview isn't so much demonstrating that, you know, obviously we should be able to tell that it meets our requirements. I mean, here's an example where it doesn't, and you can see that, but it's those cardinal directional photos are going to be the ones that are you're going to want to have that, you know, precise sort of like, you know, perspective looking at, you know, comparing the disturbance area and the reference area. So
in general, if you have to be really close, okay. In general, if you're too high, I think you're going to realize if it's going to work for us. So you have to understand that when we're passing these, it would just be like, these are all the things that we do. in order to do a final reclamation pass. We check all these things. We go through all this process. And so that's why through this program, if we want to not have to be out there ourselves and doing this work, that's why we need all this information. So if you're at 380 feet, if you can't get a good perspective on it, then that probably isn't going to work. So just remember that we're looking at this, trying to make an assessment of whether we have the information we need to pass the location for final reclamation.
In this example I have up here, I mean, this is 250 foot with our Mavic drone Pro. So, I mean, and that's the basic, you know. I think Sam, you're flying like 380, right, with some of your equipment? 330. Yeah. Good one. The question was, you know, acknowledging that there needs to be 2 years of crop growth before you submit a final reclamation notice. And yeah, you don't have to document the first year. I mean, you can at least document that second year growth. Yep. Yep. Abby. Yeah, I'll have to, maybe we can chat offline or whatever, but I've helped some operators with the USGS Earth Explorer. It can go back to like 50s, 60s. It's pretty cool. Yeah, it's real helpful. It's free. You can get on it. It's a little finicky getting started, but I can help you out with that. Okay, online. On slide 16, you asked to include flow lines on the drone imagery maps. Will the state allow us to download flow line information that is shown on the COGIS website so we overlay the flow line on the imagery? Yeah, you can absolutely use our database for that. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, you know, obviously this flow line, you know, I had a lot of discussions about submitting your flow line information. I mean, I believe it was back in May 2018 when that requirement came around. So if it was pre 2000, you know, May 2018, you're not going to need to report that, right? We're aware of that. But anything beyond that, you know, I believe starting May 1st, 2018, any flow line that was in service had to be registered by October of 2019. And then anything that got put into service after May 1st, 2018 had to be registered, you know, within 30 days. So
a lot of times operators do have that flow line information because it was your wells. So we do still want that, even if we don't have it on, you know, our COGIS maps. So anything that was plugged prior to that 2018 requirement for the flow lines, we don't know where those flow lines are, but we think you probably know where those are. And so we would like the operators to let us know that those have been properly dealt with or where they were on the landscape. Not necessarily.
I think for the virtual folks, the question was if that information isn't available, is that like an automatic denial? And it was like, no, not necessarily. So we've got Greg, slide 10, the red portion of the access road. That's not crop, but would the site still be eligible for this process? Yes, and actually, thank you, Greg. I meant to talk about that. So that red portion, that's not in cropland, right? You would want to document that with handheld photos. Okay, anything that is not on cropland, if a section of the access road is not on cropland, or if the tank battery is not on cropland, document it with handhelds. So you could still use, so it can still be eligible for this process. And then slide 11, is there a location ID for the tank battery? Can the four wells be closed while the tank battery is still in process? I don't believe so. Yeah. I mean, I know that some of these tank batteries do have location IDs, but you know, yeah, I believe they had to be tied to a well, but we can revisit this, I guess, if we needed to. What is the best I think we already answered that one. So Mandy's question here, what is the best, fastest way to ascertain if a location or well site has a variance? Well, I guess you would have to start with looking at the well and location review tabs, which I believe you guys have access to. That's for all the variances predating our emission rule change from January, 2021. Anything after that? That's a great question. Because some of that stuff isn't in there. So I might have to get back to you on the best way to see if there's a variance. But I believe actually you still should be checking that location and well location ID, because the new variance process says if you get, with the new variance process, you go through a hearings and it goes, A in front of the director or the commission, but whatever the determination is, we make you submit a Form 4 sundry for that. So there should be a Form 4 sundry, whether it was an old variance prior to our emission rule change or whether it was a new variance. There should be a Form 4 for that.
Yeah. Also the operators should know who, who applied for a variance. So the operator is going to have information themselves. I think Soil Sage is a consultant. They should know if they applied for a variance. So the early one should come in on a Form 4. The other ones will be coming in with a hearing docket, with a hearing docket number. The operator should be aware of that. And then whether that was approved or it's still in process. At the end of the process, like Chris said, there should be a Form 4 that goes out to staff, documenting what the what the variance was for. And so you're going to be able to identify that in the field with your drone and then tie it to, this is the part of the location that wasn't requiring reclamation.
Yeah, so I mean, the difference, the next question is, what's the difference between the two flow line reportings, on location versus off location sections? If it's going to be off or off location, that's going to be a Form 44. If it's on location, it'll be a Form 42. So that's really simply the difference there. Thanks, Craig. Anything else? Erica. Yeah, the question was, with this location checklist, can it be uploaded as a PDF as an attachment? And yes, that'd be great. No, I think you're gonna have to do it as a separate attachment. She was asking if it was already embedded to eForms, and no, it'll just be a separate attachment.
All the information from the checklist needs to be summarized in a Word document. So this is a checklist of what needs to be done, but all the information should be compiled in the summary itself. This is not the summary. This is just a checklist for folks to make sure they're addressing all the information. But all this information, again, needs to be in that Word document summary.
The question was, do we need to upload the summary and checklist? And that is yes. I mean, I guess we can, the guidance, I think I do have that as a requirement to upload the checklist. Yeah. Attachments. Yeah, it's part of the requirement. The question was for the audit, will the audit be for locations flown for this process or for other ones not, I guess, applicable for this process? And no, it'd only be for this process. Drew? I don't, yeah, I mean, I'm not, the question was for this checklist, will there be a drop down, for it? And I don't know that there'll be a drop down. It might just be that good old other tab. There might be something on there that you could, designate. I can maybe look into that for you and help you guys there. Okay, I've got one coming in. Oh, one more in person. Well, yeah, so the question was, what's the purpose for these handheld photos not within cropland? And, we can't differentiate, with the drone imagery, whether there's weeds there or noxious weeds or whatnot. I know there might be technology out there, but we don't have that. So it's for the purposes of knowing what's there growing. So, yeah, I mean, we're going to say no. Yeah. We can make, for right now, we're going to say no, but maybe we can look at that in the future to see. Just, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I understand that, yeah, there's some different constraints that you might not have access to, and the drone would be handy to be able to do that, but that's something that we can maybe look into, but, not right now. Does the written summary have to be attached as a Word document or can it be as PDF? I would suggest that it doesn't matter. PDF would be great. That way, no one can, not that we're going to change anything or anything, but just put it in as PDF. Yeah, PDF format's great. Ah, good question. I think I missed that in the beginning. The question was, will this training be annual? What will it be? And so I can say that probably for this 2023 season for the training, I don't think there's probably going to be any other. I mean, we're already mid-season, but I can see, hey, folks that didn't get an opportunity to take this required training, they want to participate next year. So we'll probably have this early spring next year, 2024. And then maybe we'll look at doing it, biannually, do it in the fall, late fall or something like that, early spring, early fall. So, as things change, because, you guys have a lot of great questions and, as we look at things, we might be, that's one thing I meant to mention, we could be obviously changing this guidance document over time, especially as we upgrade our fleet. I know that we will eventually be getting multi-drone spectral cameras, so that'll change the game in a very big way, but there might be changes before then. Good question. Okay. Couple more. Erica, go ahead. I mean, go ahead. Yeah, I mean, oh, The question was, do we need the pilot's certificate number? And the answer is yes. Yeah, should be. Yep. What was your name? Vincent, go ahead. Yeah, the question was for the cardinal directional photos, is there a specific spot where they need to be taken? And it's no, again, it's kind of getting back to this, like, it's kind of an art, right? I mean, I'm learning when I'm taking my panos that I want to be offset a little bit. Like sometimes if I'm right over it, you're not going to get that, good image, that perspective. So no, we're leaving that pretty flexible for y'all to, be the professionals and submit that stuff. So. Drew, did you have a question? We can, I mean, if
I'm sorry. So he's asking about just submitting a list of the licenses and not putting it on the document when it comes in. The issue for us is that, we don't want to have to fiddle with, okay, did this have a license? What is the person that did the fly? So on and so forth. So we don't want to have to juggle that on our end. So that's why it's just better to put it in the document itself. So we're not cross-checking and then do you have an updated list and then somebody left your firm, and yeah, we'd rather not do it that way.
the question was for reporting the pilot information, drone pilot information. If you have, say just 2 designated pilots, can you just put both of those numbers on every single document? Maybe one of them flew it, maybe one didn't. Like, that's fine. Yep. All right. Well, hey, thanks everybody. We'll let you get out the door and start flying. I think that that corn is getting close to being able to document. So thanks so much.